The ceremony of the presidential inauguration, the swearing in, the taking the oath of office, that goes back centuries to the beginning of the country and long before television. Yet, since the 1950s, television has us the opportunity to see and share in this historic event every 4 years, to see the mechanics of government unfold, shared in a way undreamed of at the beginning of the country. Even through tumultuous times, television has given us a front row seat to what we've embraced as the tradition of the peaceful transfer of power in this country. I'm Wally Podrazik. Welcome to a history and discussion of presidential inaugurations on television. For the Museum of Broadcast Communication, I'm TV historian, and I'm also co-author of the book, TV history book, Watching TV, 8 Decades of American Television. I'm joined by Steve Alper, veteran producer of television special events for both the commercial side and the public television side. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Wally. I've been looking forward to this, especially after what transpired yesterday. This inauguration is going to be a very interesting one to produce by both the networks and by PBS.
Yes, both of us have been on site for multiple inaugurations. You probably more than I. I have about a half dozen, including two of them in which I was part of the presidential inauguration committee working to help service the media that was covering the event, the PIC organization. And you, of course, were on the other side of the line. You were part of the television network coverage of, in particular, a couple of the inaugurals.
Well,
Why? Go ahead.
no, go ahead, please.
Why does television matter? Why does television want to cover a presidential inauguration? You once told me that it was something like covering a baseball game, in that it was going to happen anyway, but television was there. So, what does television bring? What is television trying to do when it's covering an event? It's particular the inauguration.
Well, using that reference, yes, the inauguration would happen, but the networks and PBS and C-SPAN now are responsible for providing the ability for their viewers to see what's going on in a very important event. Obviously, at one time, they would just film, it's the Fox Movie Tone News and things like that. But being able to provide this, and these were one of the events that really started to shape how the networks deals with things now and their special events. The 1977 presidential inauguration was the first one that I worked on. I was with NBC in those days, and we had the pool responsibility. And just to define what that pool means, one network, and there were really only three in that period of time, is chosen to provide the basic coverage. Also, it provides the camera links to what's happening on the podium. That staging and podium area is limited, and to get the money shot, as they call it, of what's going on there is really would have to be shared by many. There are also a tremendous amount of coordination that has to happen with both the president elect's staff, with the House and Senate radio TV galleries, which coordinates everything that happens there. And that's our responsibility, because you can't have a billion people talking to the same people and try to get things done. Things like power, for example, would be our domain. you look at this big wide open area on the west side of the Capitol where this happens, and you have camera positions, and they needed a lot of power in those days. It was a lot different than it is now. Uh, we would have to arrange for all the generators. We would have to arrange for all the camera positions. We would have to arrange for the people that would be running the cables, and the cables were huge in those days. Uh, we also coordinated how transmission would happen, and we provided this not only for the networks, but we would also provide these feeds for what are called subscribers. And let's say the BBC would use these basic feeds, and we would have back in those days. I would think we had probably around 15 cameras covering this. Uh, and we would provide a mixed feed of what was going on, and they would too. And also, we don't have any commentators. There would be no reporters for us. We are just providing what's called international picture and sound, so everybody can share it without issue. Uh, then the networks would have their unilateral responsibilities, and they would add cameras and they would add their correspondents. During this inauguration, there were basically three pools. You had one was the actual activities happening at the Capitol. You then had the group that handled the parade, and then you had the group that handled the balls at night, and then the normal
Oh, no,
Washington
we're
group.
going to talk about all three of those, but continue.
Okay, but just to give you an idea of what the responsibility is, when it comes to the unilateral stuff, you have to take care of all your own reporters and the additional sound and everything else that has to happen. In 1981, my responsibility was for the inauguration from the unilateral perspective for NBC. And that had a whole host of issues. And I'm going to let Wally get into that first because that was a day, talk about that will live in infamy that I will never forget because of what was happening in the world. Up to you, Wally, when you want to start discussing that. That was a
Well,
double
let's
nightmare.
focus. Yeah, let's focus a little bit more on just the mechanics of uh, you are there as capturing history and bringing it to the viewers. So you're not telling the presidential inaugural committee what to do and when to do it, but yet they're keeping you very well informed. What are some of the things that you would need to know in order to do a good pool coverage or good unilateral coverage that perhaps would be a surprise to the people watching? It's only like what 2 minutes for the actual swearing in, but you talked about having a massive support setup that also carries over into other aspects. So, how
Well,
much would they tell you about what was going on?
usually everything. And we would get information as soon as it's made available to tell us exactly what the movement would be. In other words, when is the first family going to arrive? When is the president-elect going to arrive? When are the guests? Where are the guests? Where are they seated? We need to know exactly who is going to be there so our director and producers know when they are discussing things where to shoot them. Uh, there's this dinner, luncheon they usually have afterwards, and the former president at that point has usually shows up there and then leaves, and they're escorted to the helicopter that would be sitting there. And we need to know everything. What time? When is it going to happen? We have an advance copy of the speech that the new president will have, so we know exactly what to do. So the camera people and directors know where to go to if they're making reference to various groups. Let's say there are a group of 300 veterans that are seated in a certain area, and they're going to talk about that. So you want to be able to shoot that. You want to know. uh, who is going to be holding the Bible, you know, simple things like what is the first lady wearing? What are the children wearing? What kind of clothes? Who designed their stuff? All those kind of things. We get a playbook like this, and that's what's required, and that's because this is a staged event, so
Right.
we
This
have a
this
lot
is not this
of
is not a break this is not a breaking news event generally. That is, there is a common ritual, there are common routines that are followed each time round. So, for instance, if you are attending the inauguration as a guest, there are you get formal invitations from Capitol Hill, and these invitations really don't change a whole lot over the years. I'm deliberately holding up both one for President Obama and then for President George W. Bush. And if you look at the contents and the directions that are in both cases, they change the names, they change the times, but basically it is a repeated ritual, and that's reassuring. And it makes your job less a covering a breaking news story than to capturing an event. But let me ask you about two things. One, the parade for President Carter, and then when Ronald Reagan had his first inauguration. So first of all, with President Carter, he did a unexpected departure. He got out of the car and walked some of the parade route. And the parade is not something that was created for television. I mean, that was there going back again through the history of inaugurations. So, were you surprised that President Carter got out of the car and started walking?
Yeah. Uh, that's, the question was, how do you cover that? And we had cameras along the parade route, but the pool had that. And also, there is a pool cameras on a flatbed truck that follows what's going on. No, including a peanut there. So they, I see, I remember that peanut. Uh, so they are following along, and it wasn't as easy to get a transmission. So they had towers along the way on this parade route. So they were able to provide pictures. The pool was able to provide pictures for the networks and the subscribers. But the fact that he got out and started walking around probably made much better television. And I don't think anybody complained.
And it became its own
Sitting and
tradition,
doing
so to
this.
speak.
Well, sort of.
Yes. And one of the things that happens, and I'm speaking from the presidential inauguration committee side, is that work on the parade route, on the stands, etc., starts long before the inauguration day. And in fact, at the park opposite the reviewing stand, you saw the reviewing stand where the president would see the peanut go by. Is right opposite that is a media stand as big, actually bigger than the presidential party stand. And the design of that and the construction of that involves multiple entities in Washington, D.C., the Park District, the city, uh, input from the Secret Service and such. And that they start designing back in the summer. So if you are the newly elected president, say, okay, I'm going to change everything about how I want this thing to play out. The answer is you can do whatever you want in terms of substance, but in terms of the construction, that ship has sailed. I mean, we've got the design and we've got the blueprints approved, and that's what's going to, as we have done in previous inaugurations, that's what we're starting with. And so I was part of discussions that we deliberately had one summer before the the 2000 swearing in, where we actually did do some tweaks and design changes because we could, because it was enough in advance. And that was both representatives from both parties, both campaigns said, we're going to be there. One of us is going to use this, but we both want to make sure we deal with those issues. The challenge, though, occasionally is that there may be breaking news, and you happen to be there the year that there was breaking news going on at the same time as this very traditional ritual handoff, the change of administrations. And that would be the first inauguration of Ronald Reagan. Tell us a little bit about how you were preparing not only to get your technical gear set up and get your power set up and get your cameras placed in. What else did you have to worry about?
Well, in those days you had the news wire, and it started banging off the wall, and we were told that the hostages were being released that day from Iran. So now we had, I guess you can call it the ultimate split screen. Uh, Sometime right after the actual inauguration, moving towards the events that were going to happen that evening, we were waiting to find out exactly where and when where they were being released to, and we did learn that it was going to be in Wiesbaden Air Force Base in Germany, and we were preparing to go to the inaugural balls at that time. So there is a photograph I have somewhere in my home. I wish I could find, but I'll find it eventually. Uh, of Control F at NBC in Washington, where the whole team there was in black tie, getting ready to go cover the balls that night. And meanwhile, we're all watching what's going on as the hostages were being released. So talk about an unplanned nightmare, and it was quite extraordinary. And I'm glad I was there because it was something to really remember. It felt great that day, and Jimmy Carter was very much involved in that. Uh, he was on the phones and involved with what was going on. Well, nobody knew what he was doing after he left the luncheon per se. It was an interesting day.
Yes, and it sort of underscores that there is this baseline that you're dealing with, which is this is the ritual, but at any time something else may happen, and it is your calling, it is your duty, it is your responsibility to make sure that that is shared with the American public in your coverage. You alluded to the presidential balls as well. And so it's like a triple assignment for television coverage. The swearing in, the taking of the oath of office is what it's all about. It's all built around that. But prior to that, there are ceremonies. Prior to that, there are events. There's the parade. And then the evening, there are the balls. Now, in contrast to a moment in history, what are you trying to do in covering a party? Because that's basically when people come into Washington, D.C. By the thousands to participate in a swearing in inauguration, there's always you got a ticket to the ball? Are you going to a ball? Which ball are you going to?
It's you got the big donors, and they want to go someplace. And as I heard Wally say before, this is where who has a ball to the Mayflower Hotel because Sinatra's going to be performing, or who's got one where a Willie Nelson is performing, and all that stuff. So, and the new president and first lady try to make each one of them because that's where they make it happen. and that was really, really interesting. And we had people that were all ready to do that, and it happened during Carter's inauguration, and it was fun. And some of us that had been working real hard for a long time got an opportunity to go and see what some of these were like. And during Reagan's one, we never made it. The other thing that happens is, for some reason, there are times in Washington where January becomes so cold it's ridiculous. The temperatures setting up for that inauguration were in the low teens and close to zero up until the day of inauguration, and then it was in the 30s. And that was also an interesting challenge with things freezing, and we had to get heating pads to put in the cameras to keep the lenses from freezing. It was an interesting day.
I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Historically, of course, there was a president who spoke a little bit too long and ended up catching pneumonia. And that was one of the shortest presidential runs, William Henry Harrison, in 1841. But there was also a concern for the second Reagan inauguration because it was very cold that day, too. I know that you weren't necessarily the pool producer then, but what happened then in terms of not only television coverage, but protecting President Reagan as he took the oath of office for the second time?
It wasn't just President Reagan, it was all the guests, the honored guests, members of Congress, and special people. It was close to zero that day, and they just couldn't be outside. So they moved everything to the rotunda of the Capitol. So obviously, where you had, let's say, 400 guests, you could have like 150. I'm glad I didn't have to make that decision. An instant pool was put together to provide coverage there. I think we each got one unilateral camera, and then the pool took care of everything else to show what was going on. It was a tough day.
And I believe, did they cancel the parade as well for that day
Yeah,
in the cold? Yeah, that,
yeah.
that is one thing. Talk about reoccurring situations. Is when I went for the Obama presidential inauguration, of course, what did I get as a tchotchke or a souvenir was a stocking cap, which had the proper logo on it. Believe me, that was not an official anything, but it was an entrepreneur who said, "Hey, I've got an Obama tag. Let me put it on what I know you really want. What you really want is something to cover your ears." And that was essential for appreciating what was unfolding. It's because what I think people don't realize is that, yes, there are many seated guests, but the people who make up the bulk of those viewing get tickets to go to a particular section of the site. They don't have a seat with their names on it. There's obviously the guests in certain circles that do have just that accommodation. So when you're talking about if you're talking about press folks, you actually spend most of the time standing unless you happen to be in your control vehicle calling the shots. I mean, basically, if your assignment is you get to cover the inauguration, you're probably putting in a pretty long day, aren't you?
Uh, yeah, you'd get there very early in the morning, and don't forget, you got to tear it all out afterwards, too. I'm going to share with you something that I, for some reason, still have. The 81 Reagan was the actual 50th inauguration. And I still have.
Gotcha. There you go. Yeah, dead center. Yeah,
Interesting.
and that's a really good, yeah, you got it. Thank you. And that's a good example of all of us as being part of the event physically. I mean, if you're coming to town, even if you're not on the dais, you are in that crowd and you are part of multiple days marking the occasion. And one of the things that's evolved, for instance, when we talked about the inaugural balls, is there's not just one. I think they're up to about a
10 or
dozen or
12.
so, a dozen different
Yeah.
locations. Yeah. And so when you're talking about covering the president, what you're actually covering is a series of drop-bys um, that each ball wants to have their moment when the new president and first lady come in, but they're not going to spend the whole night there because they have 11 others to attend. So it in itself is almost like the first social logistical challenge of the new administration, is to see how well they pull that off. Um, there's um, there's also hundreds of other unofficial balls. When you talk about what happens at an inauguration period, you're talking about a gathering of political supporters, enthusiastic volunteers, a lot of lobbyists, a lot of corporate America coming in there to say, this is the new group in town, or this is the second go round for this particular group, and so you're going to have a series of just special events, and it's all about attending, being seen, seeing people in proximity to those who will be the new uh, ones pulling the lever for power. During the evolution of coverage, there was a difference in security between, say, 1977 and, say, 2004, for instance, post September 11th. In other words, did you have pretty much free reign to come and go within certain parameters in 1977? Or, hey, I'm going to park my vehicle here. I'm going to have my shuttle going back and forth. And yes, you had to have the right credential, but beyond that, there was a lot of free movement, which I think probably was significantly reduced starting in 2004, I should say.
As far as security goes, around the network
Yes.
complexes, we always provided our own security, and we were pretty tight about that. Obviously, we had equipment that was worth a lot of money. We had security we hired for wherever cameras were left outside overnight that weren't attended to. The inaugural committee and the Secret Service and everyone else were pretty tight about and limiting access to the actual staging area on the west side. Uh, there were camera positions on top of the Capitol, both the Senate and House side. You needed special credentials to get up. But as far as roaming around in other areas, you were going to have the public roaming there also. So it really wasn't an issue. I guess the same what applied to the staging area also applied to the along the parade route in front of Lafayette Park there, and that was the same situation. But I guarantee you, it's going to be a lot different coming up.
And it was going to be, by the way, here's a network credential from CBS for their compound, a unilateral back in the 1993 inauguration. But yes, the idea of controlling access became much more important post September 11th. In the upcoming inauguration, there is, of course, the issue of COVID and not wanting to gather in great numbers. Certainly not in the concentrated seating areas of a parade route, and frankly, in the witnessing of the swearing in itself. I mean, if you look at your traditional pictures going back from Eisenhower and earlier, you see stands packed. You see people standing, people gathered round for that special moment. And as you can see from the 1953, that there's an incredible concentration of people gathered on the Capitol Hill site. And so now with COVID, there's a lot of reimagining that has been going on for just how this would be pulled off in the 2021. I think Ricky Kirshner's the executive producer of the Democratic nominating convention last summer, and he and his team put together a really sharp package that managed to capture the elements of a political convention in the virtual world of our present day. I've been looking at some of the outreach that's been going on for the inauguration. They're talking about having a virtual parade. They're certainly going to, for that virtual parade, they've been inviting organizations to participate, sort of similar to what they did with the roll call of the states back in 2020 for the nominating convention. Basically, take advantage of the virtual connections that you can use. So, stepping back to the substance, when you are listening as a network person to the speeches, I would say two of the truly memorable speeches. I don't think either of us was around for the first one, which would be FDR. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. But then there was the John Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And those are the opportunities for defining what the new administration is bringing to the country. So, your impressions? Did you have a particular favorite inauguration speech, or was there someone you think really took command of the dais and said, "Yeah, that's why we're here. We're here for the swearing in, but we're also here to hear what the new president or president reelected has to say"?
I think both Clinton and Obama's speeches were extraordinary. Uh, they are both great speakers to begin with, but they were really heartfelt, and you really, uh, you know, almost Kennedy-esque. I don't remember. I can't quote anything at this moment from there,
Yeah.
but I remember being spellbound by both of them when they spoke.
And I would concur, having been at all four of those, in that and this comes back to why television is important to be there, but also it's important to participate both in person or via television, which is you're seeing basically a blueprint of what comes next. You're seeing this is what I'm going to attempt to do. This is why you elected me. This is why we're celebrating. It goes back to that relationship that we as citizens have with the political leaders. One of the things that we're proud of here at the museum is a focus on the debates, the great debates, and also presidential politics in general. So, an invitation to go to the museum, greatdebates.org, and get some curriculum guidance for high school teachers and information about TV media. That's the greats.org through the Museum of Broadcast Communication. Souvenirs. We talked about, you showed off your badge. I've rifled through my own personal collection for a couple of things, which also give an indication of how the tchotchkes or just the print universe helps to define things. For instance, I have here credentials from two different inaugurations. One is the first Clinton inauguration, and the other is the second. And one of the differences that's possible when you are being taking your second time as president, as you can actually draw on your own past history. And so the first credential that for the 1993 inaugural was a basic abstract design, but the second one was able to reach back to what had happened 4 years before and incorporate photographs. In the case of the inaugural balls, a picture of Bill and Hillary Clinton dancing together, and that became part of the logo of that particular credential. And so, in a way, when people are attending these, they're looking also for something to take home, whether it be a button or a ticket or a program. In one case, I even sprang for an official inaugural watch, which was available at the official inauguration store. And in fact, already for the 2021 inaugural, they have been trying to connect people at home with the experience of the inauguration. There are not only souvenir sweatshirts and such, but there are also opportunities to register to be part of the virtual inaugural parade, to participate in the day of service, which has become a new tradition for the coinciding usually with the Martin Luther King holiday. So all of that is something that we can be part of at home. And you're talking about doing planning in advance. I think one of my happy memories of professional respect was the first Clinton inauguration, because there had not been a Democratic inauguration since Carter. And so we were sort of coming in having not done it for 12 years. And so, with everyone's approval, we were encouraged to reach out where necessary and where appropriate to the outgoing administration. And I had a get together, a lunch, a brief lunch with someone who had been doing what I was doing in 1993. And was basically, this is what I'm doing. Is that right? Am I missing anything? And the gentleman said, first of all, this was Herbert Walker Bush's team. And he says, well, we were directed to make sure that we do everything we can to help smooth that transition. Steve, just as you were talking about meeting with the people, planning the event, the degree of professionalism was very high there. And he said, we want to make sure that this is done right. And the level of respect I had increased multiples when I tried to take him to lunch. He said, nope, that's not the way we do it. I'm paying for my half. You could pay for your half. This was just something that needs to happen for a smooth transition. And I was quite impressed by that. And I'm sure, Steve, in your encounters and your preparations, both in '77 and in um, '81, that you would have had positive conversations with the incoming and the established as well. So,
Getting back to the souvenirs
yes.
for Clinton's inauguration, Titleist did a promo, and I still have a dozen balls that I got that are inaugural Clinton inauguration golf balls. That was a good one.
Oh, yes. That makes absolute perfect sense. They did a compact disc for the second Clinton inauguration, which was the greatest hits of the time. That is, people that were appropriate musically to that gathering, and also as you look ahead, these traditions have gone on for centuries, literally, and so. Do you think that still an important role that television plays in this transition from one administration to the other? What do you, as a television person, want to see television do in terms of moving the country forward uh, at coverage of the swearing in of the new president? How does television help?
Well, it's a very important piece of history, and being able to see it live uh, rather than reading about it in a book is a big difference. I guess all of that really started with the Vietnam War, where you were able to get daily video, film and reports from Vietnam. And people started getting used to, well, I'm not going to wait to go to the theater Friday night, to see the Fox Movie Tone News. Uh, and I think being able to provide that service, everybody really appreciated it. Uh, it's almost like why did people watch Ed Sullivan every Sunday night? Because it was a live entertainment show. I mean, being able to see
And
what's going on here is just great.
and we've become so accustomed to the fact that, of course, we're going to have a front row seat. In effect, it's great to be part of the throngs that were gathered, for instance, with the inauguration of Barack Obama. But we could see and hear him in the comfort of our own homes. And that was a really, really important change that was noted back with the Eisenhower administration. I think one of the wire services interviewed somebody who had proudly said that he had attended like a half a dozen swearing-ins over the years, and he said, "But you know what? This way is much easier because prior to television coverage, you did have to go in person to see that unfold in front of you and not wait for the movie tone newsreel. And now television gives you the opportunity and, frankly, the honor of being part of what it is that's unfolding in American politics. Steve, I'd like to thank you for sharing your direct involvement in a couple of inaugurals and your observations in others. I want to talk about the departure as a sort of a departing moment. We've talked about the different stages that you have to cover. What about when the outgoing president gets into the helicopter and flies off do you all consider where's he landing and how are we going to cover that? Is that part
And
of
the answer is
your
yes. They knew where he was
responsibility?
landing, and they covered that. They covered his departure, going to Andrews, taking off, and then landing. I remember when we had cameras in, I guess it was somewhere near Plains, Georgia.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know I don't remember how far Atlanta was from there, but they covered that. He was from away. Uh, that was an important piece of the puzzle. You know, I'm going to keep my political thoughts to myself for what's going to go on the 20th, but we'll see.
Well, and I remember also the same thing with outgoing President Bill Clinton, where by then it was certainly a refined media world. And so when he landed, he was greeted by not only officialdom within the circles of transferring from the helicopter to head on home, but there was also the chance for him to see some staff and supporters at that location as well. And it was sort of taking advantage of the window of time between the formal ceremonies, going to a congressional lunch, and then the parade would follow later. So that was sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's of now former President Bill Clinton meeting with supporters, with friends, and going off onto the next phase of life. Probably the most important thing, I think you would know this as a network person looking at the panoply of unfolding events, is that there's you don't realize how big an inauguration complex, the inauguration week, in effect, has become until you start trying to follow the checklist of events. I'm just looking at from you have things that are like there's a traditional church service the morning of the swearing in at St. John's Church. You have, as we said, the parades. You have a gala before the swearing in, and of course you have the balls after. You have opportunities for service and honoring not only the newly elected officers, president and vice president, but again, celebrating the country. So Steve, with you standing is representative of media, TV media in particular. Thank you for the professional, heartfelt approach that is taken in telling that story. Any closing comments on your part?
Well, I thank you. I've had the privilege of working with Wally. Goes back to 2000 when I did my first Democratic convention with PBS in Los Angeles, and Wally was the director of operations, which is worth a show by itself. What he had to go through, and he is one of the best. He knows everyone and gets everything done, and figures out every request from every news person, and the same thing carried over to the inaugurations. And the last couple were not the same without him. But I'm
Well,
done. I'm finished.
okay. Well, thank you very much. I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but I appreciate your comments.
You deserve it.
Um, we do have a question. We have one wrap up question. Do you? This came in via text. Do you think professionally that the inauguration will be dangerous after what happened yesterday?
God, I
Um,
hope
that's
uh,
speculation, but
precautions being taken now. They are going to build a typical convention fence around the whole area. These are these black fences that are, I think, about 8 feet high. and they're gonna, security is gonna be much tighter. They're not, you're not gonna have all those people, look, in front of the stands. I'm told that the mostly first responders and guests, and that's what they're going to limit it to. So there'll be way fewer people there, and there'll be social distance at great lengths. There are a lot of crazy people out there. I pray that sense will be there and it will be okay. But I'm sure they're taking the proper precautions. Me personally,
And
I don't think I would worry. I don't think I would
yeah,
worry. But I was in the combat camera group, so what does that tell you about?
That's right. You are a Vietnam veteran, so you've been.
No. I was nearby. I wasn't in the field.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I do concur that that is normally a part of the routine anyway. And it has become increasingly savvy over the decades. And what unfolded recently is sort of a reminder of here are some of the things we have to be particularly aware of, just in terms of people movement, just in terms of making sure that everyone is safe as these events unfold. And so that's why I am particularly impressed, even because of COVID, it was already becoming a virtual event. And I have great confidence that it will be executed very well as a virtual event, and that folks who have the responsibility of safely executing an inauguration, especially on the security side, this isn't their first go round. And so there will be awareness and expertise that's brought to the fore. And I have supreme confidence in the folks involved in doing it. So I echo your comments, but yes, it is. These are challenging times in so many ways. But again, it's one more time. I wanted to remind people that the Museum of Broadcast Communication, especially online, during these COVID times when the physical space is not available as has been in the past, that if you're interested in more information about U.S. presidents, television, the museum has a free online exhibit. It's called The Great Debates. It's at greatdebates.org, and you have it includes a free curriculum for high school teachers, as well as links to the stories of how television and media have impacted the presidency and our country. So thank you very much. Thank you, Steve Alper, for the museum. I'm Wally Podrazik.